Hello and welcome back to Serendipity Intended. My name is Tracy Ann. I am so glad you are here. I am still on vacation and I have started to amass some photos, and I wanted to talk a little bit about adding photos in to a journal kind of after the fact. So if you've been following along with my Junk Journal July challenge videos, which that challenge is done, but I created 31 pages in this journal, still have some pages at the end to create, but I hadn't journaled in them. I really just created the pages in this journal. So you can see the pages themselves are finished in terms of they're pretty, but there's no journaling on them, right? So they're empty. And to be honest, sometimes when I create a journal, I do just that. I create a journal that is just the pages responding to the prompts, and then I set them aside. But this journal, I did want to kind of be a record of the summer and all of the activities. So you can see I've still got some pages here to do. And I'm not quite ready to journal all of my vacation pages. One, because I'm still on vacation, and two, because like this page is going to be sort of a there and back, and I don't want to journal this until I have the back part to include. But at the same time, I did want to get a head start on that, and so I've printed some pictures that I want to start including, or at least figuring out where I'm going to include them, and I thought I'd share that with you. So this is going to be a little bit of a how to think about things video, as well as probably a little bit of adding to pages that are already there. So as you can see, I've got a pile of videos, or not videos, sorry, photos printed out. And I printed these on a new to me printer. And just to share that with you, I'm not being compensated for this. I just really like the printer. So it's a Kodak Mini 2 Retro, and it prints in a three-step process. So it prints yellow and magenta and cyan, and then it laminates it. And I just love the way that the colors print. They're absolutely gorgeous. You also have the option to do like a collage print, and you can also, so this one is, I put a filter on to give it a little bit of a look and feel, whereas this one is just exactly as the image shows up. It does print with this little tab on the end that you can just perforate off. So anyway, I have these here, and I wanted to include some of them in this journal, and also I wanted to show you something that I used to do a lot of a number of years ago, and I saw a video by Louisa Heinzel that she did really recently, and in it she did the same technique, and it reminded me how much I really enjoyed it, and I thought it would be perfect for this sort of boho vibe journal. And that is to distress your photographs. They're the edges of your photographs. So I think you can see how the edges here are a little bit white. So I'm traveling, so I don't have my big sander, but I do have this little sort of emery board sander, and literally all that I did was to kind of go like this around the edges until I got them distressed to the amount that I wanted. And I think this adds just a little bit of I'm gonna do this off camera because I don't want the dust on top of my pictures. But I think it adds just a little bit more of sort of that vintagey, distressed boho beach vibe that I've got going on here. And so I think I'm going to be doing this for many, if not all, of my photographs. This one, I think I'm going to put on the back of this card here. I'm just going to tuck it in the spot for the moment, but this is one of the pages that I'm going to probably work on. But first I want to sort of layer these in where I think they might go. And for those that I don't know where to put or where I want to put them, I'll go ahead and tuck them into my daily journal where I'm keeping kind of track of my memorabilia. So one of the pages that I had done here for the prompt of texture was this page. And I really liked the texture on this page, but I felt as though it needed something here. And I thought a perfect thing to put there would be a photo. And so I took this one. Now the original image was much more saturated. I used a filter on it to kind of make it look more like an old time photo that had been hand color tinted, because I thought it would work really nicely with the colors that were here. So I'm going to just tear off this bottom here, and then I'm going to use the emery board to kind of distress it and then add it in to my page. I also think I'm going to trim off just the top and maybe the bottom of this just a bit. Since I'm going to do the sanding off camera, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, do that, and then I'll come back. Actually, it occurred to me something I can show you as a tip. Because I'm traveling, I didn't bring everything. And one of the things that I did not bring was my paper cutter, because most of what I'm cutting is fairly small and my paper cutter's pretty large. And I didn't think to pack my small sort of guillotine type cutter. But a trick to cut things, so this is a notepad, and you can take just anything, another photo, sticky notepad, anything, line it up with one edge and then use that as sort of a guide, and you can get a pretty good edge to it. So just a little bit of a tip there. Now I am going to distress the edges here. Okay, so you can see that now the edges are a little bit distressed. One thing I also did, rather than just going around the edges, I also held this and kind of went like this on the corner here and also a little bit here. And that ended up distressing a little bit more of the image. And I did that because the prompt for this page was texture. And so I thought doing that would add just a little bit more texture to the photo. And then I can just sort of tuck this in here like so. And I think that fills out the page a little bit more. Now, ideally, I would have a bigger piece of sticky tape for the back here, but I don't have any at home, and so obviously I didn't bring any. So instead, I'll use 2 strips of this thinner tape, which is fine. This is not at all heavy, so I don't really need anything bigger for to keep it in place. It's really just more to have something that is kind of getting both sides to keep it adhered the way that I want it. Now, I did choose to not go all the way to the edge, and that's because I want the edges of the photo to be up. And then I'll kind of tuck it where I want it. And so I did let it go off this edge just the slightest bit. And there. So that page feels perhaps a little bit more complete than it did before. So I've got my little photograph added here, and maybe I'll come back and journal about this, maybe not. I do have this whole inside area here that I can add photographs or journal. I'm really adding this more as another embellishment or item on the page. Okay, now I do have this photograph, which is from my son's concert. It's not the best photo. I was fairly far away and then I zoomed in, but it is an image from the concert, and I had created a page, this one here, so the prompt was music, and I created this intentionally knowing that I was going to go to this concert to see my son play his clarinet and that I would want to be adding it. And I included actually this little journal card so that I could put this image here on the back. Now I need to trim this down just a bit because it's too big for the card. And I also do need to distress the edges. So again, I'm going to do that off camera, and then I will be back to kind of add it to the card. Right, so I trimmed it down top and bottom, and also on the sides, in part so that just the border would make a little bit more sense, but also to try and minimize the importance of this person that's sort of in the foreground. I actually think I'm going to trim this a little bit further. I'll go ahead and stand it, and then I can add it to my card. All right, so my edges are distressed, and I like the way that this is sitting on the card. I went through my scraps to gather a few things to add to this card to connect it to this page because they belong together. You won't actually see it because it'll be tucked in this way, but if you flip it over, I wanted it to make sense. So kind of using these colors, but actually let me slide this over here. But then I thought, I'm gonna zoom in just a tad. I found this little bit that I had cut a piece out of, a square out of, that was just sitting in my scrap box. And look how perfectly it frames him and draws attention to him and off of the other stuff in the background. So I'm going to use this on this image, I think, to have a little bit of fun with that, create a little bit of dimension and focus on my guy. But I do also want to incorporate some elements that connect it to the other page. So I'm going to use this piece of tea bag that is in my scraps, and I'm also going to use the same ink that I used on this and other pages to add a little bit of definition to this tea bag. All right, so again, I have my vintage photo here, and I'm gonna use that because that's the color that I used on the original page. And I'm gonna add a little bit more around the edge. I had done some, but I want a little bit more than I had. Let's see, like that. And then I've got this little bit of tea bag, and I thought I could do the edges of the tea bag. So just, oops, trying to get the edge a little bit so that it stands out a little bit more against the background than it did before, when it was just natural tea bag. This particular section didn't have a whole lot of staining on it, so. Okay, so I thought it would be nice to kind of set this here and let it be behind the photo. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm just gonna use the smallest bit of glue stick. And I'm also realizing that I did not bring a catalog to glue on, and I did not bring any wax paper, which was not good thinking on my part. So I'm gonna have to improvise in that respect. Okay, so then I can put my picture here, and like I said, I have this square, which I actually also think I will go ahead and ink, and I think I am going to do the bottom because I think the torn edge there is kind of interesting. And let's see if I can get the inside. It's always challenging to do the inside like this. If you have a makeup sponge, it's actually even easier to get in because you can kind of get into the corners. I do at home, but I didn't bring one, so again, make and do. All right, actually, I was trying to go like this before, and it didn't hang up off enough. I actually think I'm gonna bring this up above just a little bit, and that'll minimize this person's head in the photograph. So yeah, that'll be nice. But I also want to hide this edge, I think, peeking out just a little bit. I like this pink, but this works better with what I've got going on here. So I can put that just, I think I'll just go ahead and, I'm just gonna glue this down. Grab my pencil and make a quick registration mark so I know where I want it. And I'm not sure how well the glue is going to work on the back of this photograph. And so I'm just not gonna risk it. I've got this tape. I'll just go ahead and use that because I know that the tape is fine with the photograph. It's not gonna seep through. It's not gonna destroy the image at all. So it's the better bet, right? And then line that up with my registration mark. And I probably should use the tape, since this is going to go on the front of the photo, because it is laminated, which means it's going to be a little smeary if I use the wet glue, and I'm not sure whether the glue stick is going to be sufficient. So if I do it this way, then I get just a hint of that tea bag peeking out, and then I also kind of cover the edge of the photo, which is the goal. All right, and then I'm going to use a little bit more tape right along this top edge here, and then along this edge, and that'll help keep the frame close to the picture on the inside, but it'll let this bottom edge lift up just a bit and create a tiny bit of dimension. On the page. There, I think that's sweet. And then that gives me a little spot there to do some journaling. And now I have a photo that goes with this image. I'll come back later and add the journaling, but that's one photo taken care of. Now, I have a bunch of other photos here, and I need to think about where I could add those. So I've already got this one and then this one. Now I do have these pages here that I've set aside for going to the Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens in Richmond. I could not recommend it more. So I'm definitely going to use these images on this page. So I've got all of these. I've got, and then, now this one is from that same picture, but I thought I could just use this as an embellishment somewhere else. And then I also have this one, which isn't as floral, but they had these really cool statues. They're alebrijes all throughout the park or through the gardens. And this one happened to be inside of the sort of hothouse area. And they're just stunning. So I wanted to include a photograph of that somewhere in the journal. But these four, I really want to kind of capture, especially this one. I just love how this turned out on this page. I think they're so, so pretty. And so they will get tucked in. This will probably be a whole page in and of itself. So I'm just going to tuck those there. I've got the back side here that I could also do some additional pictures with whatever doesn't work on the front here. And then of course, I had done this page for day 26 of the Junk Journal July. So we've got all of this here, and I need to find some pages for some of these other items. These are related to my trip. This one in particular, I think I'm going to include, because we went to a restaurant and I got a sangria, and it literally was the size of a small bowl. So I think I might include that here because it was a stop on the way down. And then I'm also thinking, this is some photos of the building where we stayed, and I'm thinking that that might be nice perhaps here. So I'm gonna just tuck that in. It doesn't really fit on a particular day. The gardens do. Actually, yeah, let me go ahead, because I know I'm gonna use that on the day that we went to the gardens. So I can tuck that right in there. Okay, and then I have some other things here. I want to find a place for this image. I just absolutely, oh, look, isn't that gorgeous there? It kind of matches the colors in this flower. I just need to decide where to include it. Now, I could put it on the back here. So, oh, look how pretty that looks. Yep, that's going on the back here. Let me set these aside. So again, tear off this little bit, and I will use my emery board to, you know what, I think before I do that, I'm gonna trim this, make it a little bit more square. I think that'll be fun. And then I can put it onto the back of this tag. Okay, so again, just the edges. It does occur to me that this is probably not the right tool, but if you wanted the photo itself to look more grungy, you could take a sanding block or piece of sandpaper and just kind of go over the entire image and distress the whole thing. You can see I've got a little bit of that right here at the corner. But I think that's really sweet, right like that. And I kind of think I just want a little bit of something more, like maybe, I kind of like that red, to just outline this ever so slightly. All right, so again, let me glue this down and trim this out, and then I'll see if I'm done or if I need to do something more. All right, so there we go. And then I do think I'm going to go ahead and use some of the same distress ink around the side. So I'm looking at the page that this is going to go on. Now this is on the back of the card, right? So it won't show up right away, but that doesn't mean that I can't use this page as inspiration for what else I might do. And so I'm looking through, so there's this little bit of brown here that's peeking out. And again, I have a little strip of this paper bag, I guess. So I'm gonna go around the edges of that with the same ink. And then I'll use my glitter glue for this. There, glue that down, and then this is a little bit heavy just because of the multiple layers. So I'll use the glitter glue there as well. Okay, so just super quick, but now I've got that image captured in my journal, and it also ended up creating an extra little dimension on the tag sticking out, and so then it's there. I've got a spot to journal, and I've also got that lovely image captured in there. Okay, and then I thought too that, so this is a picture of my family. We were celebrating my son's birthday. This is also the last photo of our family for a while because that same son is moving to the West Coast. So I thought it would be fun. It sort of fit the quote to me a little bit, and I thought the picture would be fun here on the back. I took it at a weird angle, and so I'm going to just go ahead and put it on the page at that same weird angle, just so that we look right in the picture. Plus, I think it adds a little bit of fun that way. Considering the colors that are on the page and some of the bits and pieces that I have, and I want to dress this up just a tad. I'm mostly going to use this as a journaling card, but I don't want to just stick the picture on it and be done. So I'm kind of playing with what some options are, just to jazz it up the tiniest bit. And as always, I like putting a little registration mark on my page so that I know where I want things to end up. So that after I put the adhesive on the back, I can get it in the right spot and not have to worry about landing it in the right place with that adhesive on there. So on this one, I had originally thought that maybe I would do something behind the photograph, and ended up deciding that rather than going behind the photograph, that I would instead use that little snippet as another element on the page. And so go ahead and add some glue to that, and then adhere it down on the lower right-hand corner. So this is predominantly intended to be a journaling card, not really something to make beautiful, but I didn't want to leave it totally plain, so I grabbed my Micron 05 because it gives a little bit thicker of a line, and because the snip of paper that I used in the lower right hand corner had a black border on it, I decided to kind of draw in a similar border on the image just to kind of tie them in. And then the bottom edge of that snippet didn't have the black border, so I went ahead and added that just to help those two pieces kind of fit together and make a little more sense together. And then because I am trying to add a little bit more doodling and handwork, I decided to grab that Micron again and just add some lines, kind of to create a little bit of a border on that image. Doesn't add any extra bulk, but it does add sort of a hand-done touch to the page and a little bit of that journaling, or excuse me, that doodling feel that I wanted to add in. And I can always come back afterwards and add some color to that doodling if I want to, or I can just leave it in the black and white. And then decided I would use the same sort of idea on the graphic or the snippet down in the lower right, again, just to sort of connect the two together. So a pretty simple doodling, nothing terribly complicated, but it adds a little bit of something to the back of that journaling card. I had this sculpture from a visit to the Richmond Gardens, and I really wasn't sure where I wanted to put it. It definitely has to do with the gardens, but it wasn't something that I wanted to add to the gardens page. But as I was flipping through, I realized that this photo of my son and his partner really color-wise matched well with the embellishment that I have for my swatches page on the mirror page. And so it felt like that was a kind of a logical place to put this photo. Not that those two have any connection to them in terms of what they'll ultimately be about, but just because visually they make sense opposite each other on the page, which is another thing to keep in mind as you're adding pictures into a journal that you've already created, is to think about, okay, where do the colors in my photo make sense in relationship to the ideas and the pieces that are already there. So as you can see, I'm looking at particularly the greens in the swatches page on the right and some of the other colors that are there, and I'm grabbing just some bits and pieces that I did add from my scraps from all of the Junk Journal July pages that I did, and I'm using those to create just a little bit of a background behind that photograph so that it's just not stuck by itself on the page. It makes a little bit more of a statement that way. And you can also see I'm leveraging the washi tape that was previously there to attach that tipped in page, that little blue page that was tipped in. And I'm just incorporating that into the little cluster that I'm creating behind this image. And honestly, I would say that's a tip not just for photographs, but for any kind of memorabilia or additional items that you add to a page after you've already created it, is to think about how do you incorporate what is already there into what it is that you are adding so that it doesn't feel added on. It feels like it was there in the first place. It was always part of the intention. Now, I specifically grabbed the music note paper here because my son is a musician and conductor. And so I thought having a bit of that music note paper would also be relevant on this particular page. Definitely did not want any raw straight edges there, so tearing that dark green piece of paper up a bit and just trying to figure out exactly where I want everything in my cluster. Now, normally these pages are both pretty light, and I don't think that they really need the art glitter glue to stay stuck. But it was easier to put a little bit of that glue on those bits so that I could adhere them together and then flip them over and glue them down as a unit. So I went ahead and grabbed the art glitter glue. Now you notice here I added in another little bit. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I want to do in terms of creating the layers behind this image. Again, because really the photograph on that little tipped in blue page is becoming a page in and of itself. And so I want to give it some attention to make it feel intentional and part of the original plan and not an afterthought. So I went to glue that down, thinking I was going to use the light green. And then when I saw the back, I saw an opportunity to add just a little bit of extra color. It's got a very similar mulberry color to the floral fabric on the opposite page. And it also had a little bit more texture to it. So I thought that was a good fit for that particular photo. And so a little bit of adhesive on the back, and then went ahead and glued that down onto the page. Now, it still felt like it needed something, and I had this sticker from one of the fruits that we had bought, and I sometimes like to use those in my pages, but the color was completely wrong. So I went through the stash that I brought, grabbed a few items that I thought could potentially work in that spot. And so, as always, I'm just going to audition them. That blue was completely wrong. And also, I think the button was a little bit too small. Now, I always love a good butterfly. And I ended up deciding that was just a little bit too large. Now, I'm not sure why I thought a bug would be a good idea, but size-wise and color-wise, it sort of fit. So I wanted it to work, but it just didn't end up working. The blue oval was way too small, and although the flower was the right size, I wasn't thrilled about the color. And that label felt like it made a whole lot more sense in terms of what was already there. So all I needed to do was add a little bit of distress ink around the outside edge just to help it pop out a little bit from the background, and then go ahead and glue that down. After I did the distressing and put it down, I realized I didn't really like the brown, and that if I was going to mirror the circle on the opposite page, that brass or bronze coppery metal tag, that I would be better off using black to edge the circle. So I went back in. I'm not too worked up about the brown being there because I think the brown ties in a little bit with the copper color, but I think the black makes the label make a little bit more sense there. And then in this case, because it's going on a glossy surface, I decided to use the art glitter glue instead of the glue stick just because I feel like the glitter glue works a little bit better. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have put that so close to his head, but it is what it is. Then I had this absolutely amazing statue to include, and I needed to find a place for that to land. I originally thought this page because I thought the colors worked, but it just did not make sense size-wise. So again, just kind of flipping through, trying to decide where it could be, where it might make sense. I also thought about maybe tucking it in the envelope there. And then I realized that this quote on the page, this two-page spread, had to do with being in the garden. And I also thought the colors of the statue worked pretty nicely with the image or the colors on this two-page spread. So I decided I'd just go ahead and add this image to the back of the card. And it wouldn't be something that would be part of the main page, but if you pulled the tag out, then it would still make sense with the colors that were there. It was a little bit larger than I wanted it to be. So I went ahead and just trimmed off a little bit of it so that it wouldn't go over top of the hole. And that'll fill out the tag nicely. I'll still have a little bit of room at the top of the tag that I can add in a note about what it is and where we saw that. But it kind of finishes off the back of that journaling tag nicely and allows me to kind of capture a hidden treasure inside of my journal. I do have this picture of myself, and I wanted to include that at the beginning. And I thought briefly about, no, maybe I could put it on the front. And then the other option, of course, was to put it on the back of the journaling card. And really, the decision to do that came down to whether or not I wanted to have my image be there when you opened up the journal or whether I wanted that to be hidden. And I ended up deciding that I really wanted to just kind of hide it a little bit. And that's why I'm working on the back side of the card instead of the front side of the card. I sort of surprised myself a little bit with this particular image because, or background paper, because it's got a lot of orange in it. Orange is not a favorite color. And I've been using orange in this journal as a contrast and a complement to the pinks that I'm using. And and yet that orange paper just I thought was really interesting behind the photograph because I got a lot of different patterns behind with only adding one piece of paper. So there's a lot more interest to that background frame that I created just because the image itself is not all over it. It's the top corner is got more white in it. The right hand side has a lot more orange in it. And again, because this card is a little bit stiffer and it's going to come in and out, I feel like it's going to flex a bit. And so I'm going to use the art glitter glue here just to help it stay stuck, even with being pulled in and out and in and out. Not to get my fingerprints all over the photograph. And again, I really was trying to figure out a place to use that sticker because I thought this also needed something, but that didn't work. I do like the butterfly though. What I don't like about the butterfly is the white border. So I didn't go completely around it, but I definitely wanted to do some of the edges and particularly around the antennas. And then because I think a little bit of it is going to hang over the back side, I went ahead and inked just that back part. Now again, this isn't the first thing that you're going to see. It's the back of a journaling card, right? It's going to get pulled out. So it doesn't need to be super complicated. Making it too complicated is going to create a ton of bulk that I really can't afford. And it's not necessary for this to be interesting. It's just sort of like an author card, so to speak, at the beginning of my journal. And that's all that I want, is just something to complement that image and sort of set it off a bit. And I think this butterfly and the one little piece of paper that I put behind it does that really nicely. And again, I can go back and add some journaling to the card at a later time. But I'm good to go in terms of that card. Now I am going to add a border again, this time using my 01 microns, a little bit thinner than I did on the last picture. But just adding that little bit of frame helps it sort of set off just a bit. And then I did go, once I went carefully around the edges, I did go a little bit more loosely around parts of it just to give it a little bit more of a casual hand-drawn feel. And I did the same thing with a bit of the butterfly, just to create a little bit more texture. And then also used a little hatch mark pattern in a couple places on the card to add some shading and again a little bit of doodling. This is kind of like a Zentangle technique that I'm using here just to add some marks and create a little bit of shading. I know it's hard to see the actual pattern, but you can see from this definitely how the shading just adds a little bit of something. Again, without creating a ton of bulk. And there's a little bit easier view of the hashing, but just adds a little bit of extra to the page. So a nice little tuck spot, and I can do something with the front as well if I decide to. Now, I had already glued in this photograph before I decided to roughen up the edges of the photos I was adding. So I wanted to go back and just rough up those photos as well. And it was a little bit tricky to do this within the book, but I managed to make this one work. It's probably not as distressed as some of the others, but it definitely does fit. And you can still sort of see that same look. And I was really okay with good enough being good enough. Unfortunately, on this page, I couldn't get to the edges in the same way because it was glued down. So I tried to do a little bit of distressing and then decided I really wasn't going to have a whole lot of success, and that in the grand scheme of things, it probably didn't matter too terribly much. So one last look through at the pages or the pictures that we added into our journal. Some of the techniques that we used: distressing the page, collaging behind the images, creating a frame to go over the photo to focus our attention on one particular part of an image, adding an image as part of a collage that's already there, hiding an image, inside of a tag within a pocket. I hope that there was something in this video that you saw that might inspire you. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, I hope that you make a great day. Goodbye.